Mequon Nature Preserve plays host to countless species of insects. The native plants that make up our hundreds of acres of land act as both food and shelter for our six-legged friends. From beetles and bees, to wasps and dragonflies, and many, many more. Butterflies are probably the most beloved bug by most people, and if you ask someone on the street to name one, their first answer would probably be a monarch. But why is that? Although they are a large species with beautiful colors, Wisconsin is home to many dazzling colored butterflies, some of which are larger too. What makes monarchs so unique is the life cycle and amazing journey they take across our continent. Hi, my name is Jamie. I work at Mequon Nature Preserve as an educator. If you've ever been on any of my field trips, or if you've seen some of my videos in the past, you probably know that I'm a huge bug nerd, and so I'm very, very excited that we get to talk about an awesome insect. So today we're going to be talking about monarchs, so let's hop right into it. Monarchs belong to the insect order known as Lepidoptera, which comprises all of the butterflies and moths. There's about 180,000 species in there that we know of, so they are a very, very successful animal. Monarchs belong to the butterfly family known as brushfoots, and that family gets its name from their short front legs that have very long hairs on them like a brush. Are monarchs native? Yes, they are. But they don't live here year-round like other species, nor do they have a life cycle that does. A lot of Wisconsin species overwinter here as chrysalises, whereas the monarch can be thought of as a tropical butterfly that has followed the milkweed north, milkweed being their favorite plant. It's actually the only plant that they can eat. So they follow it north when it's summer, but when the winter temperatures come and the milkweed goes away, the monarchs are then forced to retreat back to the warm climate of Mexico. Now, obviously, flying from Wisconsin all the way to Mexico is no easy feat. And as I had mentioned earlier, this journey that they take is what makes monarchs so unique here. And there's actually a word for this journey, and lots of different animals make movements like these. It's called migration. Migration is a seasonal movement of animals from one region to another. So when you see monarchs here in the spring, you are actually witnessing that migration in action. Those butterflies were not born here in Wisconsin. They were born somewhere in the southern United States and flew all the way up here. They are actually the offspring of the generation that had left us the previous fall. So let's break this migration down into a step-by-step process so we can better understand it. Starting with the generation that arrived here in Wisconsin in spring, let's say usually around late May is when we see our monarchs arrive. That would be the first generation. There's usually four, sometimes it can be five, but it's usually 4 generations of monarchs in a season. So when we have them arrive in May, you are looking at the very first generation of that year. They were born somewhere in the southern United States, and they were the children of the ones from the year previous that had overwintered in Mexico. Now when they arrive here in Wisconsin, the first thing they do is they find that milkweed and they lay their eggs on it. Pretty much after that, their time is up. Their mission's complete, so they pass away. The next generation and the next one to follow that, for those 2 generations then, will both live for about 6 weeks would be a long time for them. So they're anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks. They will fly around, they will pollinate, and they will lay their eggs again, and they will die. So that's going to happen twice in Wisconsin over the summer. Then we get to the 4th generation, which is the really, really crazy, cool generation. They're even known as super monarchs. So they actually have a hormone that is turned off in their body that tells them to age and to reproduce, and instead it tells them to build up a lot of fat in their abdomen, so they feed a lot on nectar, and they're getting ready for their journey because the 4th generation is going to live for up to 8 months. So they are going to fly from Wisconsin. Once it gets cold, they'll fly all the way south to the mountains of Mexico, and that is where they overwinter. And the cycle pretty much completes at that point, because then after winter they will then fly to the southern United States, lay their eggs and pass away, and the cycle continues. Now, I know I just made a 1-year process go by in like 30 seconds, so I want to backtrack now and let's talk about some of the little details that you might have even been wondering in your head, like, wait a minute, how does this little butterfly come from Wisconsin all the way to Mexico? How does it know to get there? Well, a lot of animals, including ourselves, have something known as an internal clock. And the example for us would be, we know usually when it's bedtime, you get tired at night, or you might know, hey, I'm pretty hungry, and without looking at a clock during the midday, you might say, I think it's noon because I'm hungry and it's lunchtime. We have a clock built into us that basically can tell time and will tell us what activities to do. Animals have these too, and monarchs actually have 2 internal clocks. Their first internal clock tells them what their mission is. So they will know whether or not they are supposed to hang out here in Wisconsin and pollinate and then reproduce and die, or if they are the super monarch. So depending on the time of the year, which their internal clock can tell them, they will know what they're supposed to do. So when it comes around to fall, that internal clock on that super generation will tick on and say, all right, we're heading south, we have to fly a very long time. So that's how they know whether or not they're supposed to stay here or leave. Their second internal clock is built in their antenna, and that actually allows them, it functions like a compass, and it can tell them what direction they're going. It finds out, depending on what time of day is, where the position of the sun is, and that tells them if they're supposed to fly to the left and the right of it. In all honesty, we still don't know exactly how the monarch knows where these mountains, because they always go back to these same mountains in Mexico. And we're still not 100% sure how they actually know the location, but we at least now know how they have their heading. They know what direction they're going, judging by the position of the sun. That's why if you are rearing monarchs, which means taking care of the caterpillars until they grow up, it's very important that you do it outside. You can keep them in a container if you want to keep them safe, but make sure that they always have the sunlight shining down on them and that they can keep track of that cycle, because that's what keeps their clock ticking correctly. There's a lot of evidence now that if we are raising monarchs indoors with different temperatures and they're not getting the sunlight that they need, they're having a much more difficult time migrating south to Mexico. Now, I mentioned how easily recognizable the monarch butterfly is to people. But just like the adult, a lot of people are very familiar with the caterpillar because its design is equally colorful. And so there's actually one outside that I think we'll go take a visit to. But I want to point out, why is it that both the adult and the child version are very colorful? You'll actually notice that some of these butterflies on here, and more in the moth world, they often have more natural and dark colors trying to blend in with like bark and trees and stuff. That's because they don't really care if they're seen. So camouflage is when you want to hide, and so you try to look like your environment, and so that's something that a lot of moths like to do. But for the monarch, it's pretty much the opposite. It's very colorful, it's even got spots on it, it's very easy to see. And likewise, the caterpillar has many different colors on it, and that's basically telling all the predators around it, I am fully aware that you can see me and I don't care because I know that you shouldn't eat me. And that has to do with the plant that they eat, which is milkweed. It's the only plant that the monarch caterpillar can eat. And the milkweed is toxic, it's poisonous. The sap in it, that sticky sap, if you ever pop a leaf off, actually has something in it that's known as cardiac glycosides. And they can be, they don't taste very good. So not only is the monarch toxic, but it tastes bad. So that might already be a deterrent, but if something is really determined to eat the monarch, it might find out that what it just ate was, make them sick. So it's their defense mechanism, it's what keeps them from being eaten. So they basically project to the world that, I am perfectly fine with you seeing me, because I don't think you should eat me. In fact, it's so successful that there's another butterfly over here known as the viceroy, who has tried very hard to look like the monarch so that it too can benefit from not being eaten. Its hopes are, if I look like I'm poisonous, then you won't eat me. So here we have the second step in the life cycle of the monarch. This is the caterpillar. This is something that probably a lot of people recognize and know. This is what hatches out of the egg from the adult monarch. And when they hatch, they're not this big. They're much, much smaller. So even though we can call this like a child, that actually goes through multiple growth steps within that this form. And so when it's very, very small and it starts to get bigger and bigger and bigger, each one of those steps are called instars. So he'll get bigger and bigger and bigger, and you'll notice that he has pretty much shredded this milkweed of almost all of its leaves. They have to eat a lot of milkweed in order to become an adult. And there's not just one type of milkweed plant. So the one that this one is on common milkweed, but there are other milkweeds. I think there's plenty of milkweeds in Wisconsin, but to name a few that you might be more familiar with, the orange version is known as butterfly milkweed. There's swamp milkweed, world milkweed, poke milkweed, and they can eat any of the milkweed plants. It's not just the common. The common is probably the one you'll see the most, around roads and around yards and stuff. That's more, and the leaves are much bigger, so you're much more likely to look around on these plants for eggs and for caterpillars, but they can eat all the different types of milkweeds.
My name is Nick, and I'm the Restoration and Research Ecologist here at Mequon Nature Preserve. And one research element that we partake in every year is the monarch migration tagging. And right now in September is peak migration season for those super monarchs that will be heading down to Mexico to overwinter. And essentially how to tag monarchs is we're essentially placing stickers on their hind wings. And if you can see, each of their stickers have a unique code that we then record on these data sheets and put into a database, and the folks at Monarch Watch will then be able to tell where these monarchs are coming from in hopes to track their migration, figuring out their time when they are migrating in the year, their peak migration, and when these monarchs were leaving their original sites. So pretty much the way you have to catch these monarchs is by going out by some of their favorite flowers during this time of year. Their favorite flowers a lot of times right now is going to be some of the blazing star species, liatris, or some of the cone flowers and sunflower species that are blooming right now. So if we want to tag the monarch butterflies, the first thing we have to do is actually catch the monarch butterflies. And this is simply just going out there with insect nets and catching the butterflies and then carefully securing them in order to put the tags on their hind wings. Some of the things that we record are the sex of the monarchs, and one way to tell if it's a male or a female is by the males having a pheromone sac on their hind wings. And once the sticker is placed on the underside of the hind wings, these monarchs are let free and hopefully caught down in Mexico. If you're interested in tagging monarchs, you can go to monarchwatch.org to order tags for next year, or you can come to the Mequon Nature Reserve. We host a monarch tagging event every year around the beginning of September, right at the start of peak migration, and you can come out and help us tag as many monarchs as we can catch. And the best part is, it's free.